Uh, this is our keystone. My dad was from Pennsylvania, so he had a license plate on the front of his car most of his life. I'm a Keystoner, all right, because that's Pennsylvania's identity. It's that specially shaped piece that fits right at the top of an arch that holds everything else in place. So this is sort of the keystone of what we've been teaching all the way through. And if we do it right, we'll go back through all the pages and we'll see how it all fits in and how it all fits together, because we're going to come full circle. Remember where we started? We said we were going to try and live as much as is humanly, spiritually possible, free of fear, free of resentment, anger, bitterness, angst, free of guilt, which means free of regret, free of remorse, free of that negativity that comes with our failures, and feeling powerless and helplessly trapped. Now, if you were to actually take that sense right there and say, if you had to encapsulate it into one word, what would it be? I feel worthless. Okay? When we don't live free of these things, we have this sense of worthlessness. And that's where we get into the problem where people say, well, you're suffering from low self-esteem. You're suffering from low self-worth. Well, yeah, because I got all this stuff I'm carrying around, okay? And then we talked about how there are the deepest fears of men and the deepest fears of women, and how one has to figure out how to take care of pushing back the fear of their companion when that's really not our biggest concern. And then we have to come back the other direction. We have unconditional love, we have conditional love, the I'll love you forever part of it, and then there's the if part of it. If you want me to be happy, if you want me to be smiling, if you want me to be supportive, I have to have some conditions, all right? So the unconditional and the conditional. And then here most recently, we went through and said there are three persons all in the same person. There's the parent, the child, and then the adult. And we talked the last time about how the parent and the child are set into us at a very early age, but they don't have the capacity for deep, genuine love. One is trying to control, one is trying to get free of control, one is trying to set the standards, the other one's trying to break down the standards, and you have the dialogue of the parent and the child. When you reach the age of accountability or something close to that, the adult begins to blossom. They begin to see both the fact that there's a pull on the inside. I don't like to call it conscience, but if you want to say conscience, could we have you pull that door closed there, Ruth, if you would, too, just because I think there's going to be some noise out there. So we've got all of these things going, and the adult comes in and tries to find a way to bring balance into life, all right? So if you've got two people in a marriage or in a relationship or in an employment situation, you've actually got six people. It gets very crowded in there because there's a lot of stuff going on. So now coming full circle, we're going to be talking about how do you understand self-worth, self-esteem. Where does it come from? Where does it originate? How do you lose it? How can you get it back? And there's a whole lot of dynamics here that help us to understand. But we'll need all of this stuff we did before we can make sense out of it. All right, so I've got a piece of paper here, and it's not profound and it's not unique. It's just simply sort of a discussion starter. And it said, how do we lose our self-worth? Well, you have to understand what self-worth is. It's a really bad name because self-worth does not come from self. It comes from somebody else. All right? Your feeling about yourself comes because somebody told you whether or not you had value or not. Okay? Now, silly story. I was in the 4th grade. I was taking art. My art teacher was Miss Cartier. It was spelled Carter, but it was just one of those things, okay? And she had this Albert Einstein type hair. She had this demonic kind of eyes that just kind of radiated this intensity of emotion. She was one of the best artists I ever known, the most creative people, the most blessed person. She could take anything and make it beautiful. We had, back in those days, we had what was known as the carnival in high school, and each one of the classes had to create not only a booth and everything, but they also had to create this float for the big parade down through town in the middle of the summer. And everybody competed to who can going to get Miss Cartier as their sponsor, because they were going to win the competition hands down, all right? And so she would create papier-mâché horses that looked like they could just jump right off the wagon bed. I mean, she had this wonderful way about her. She was also emotionally unstable. Just fact of life. So one day, she assigned us up on the 3rd floor in the grade school building in which I was a part. She assigned us an assignment, something like, draw something from your imagination. Draw me something that you imagine. Well, she had made a mistake, a technical mistake. She had placed me in the row next to the windows overlooking the playground. And so I just glanced out the window and I started drawing what I saw out the window. Did a pretty decent job. But when she came around and saw that I was just looking out the window, she said, "Bobby Douglas, you are the most uncreative person I have ever met." 4th grade. I was still saying that when I was in college. I went to one of my first classes in Findlay College, and they said, our job here is to help you become the most creative person you can be. And I said to the people leading the class, you're wasting your time with me because I'm one of the most uncreative people you will ever run into. Was it true? No. It never had been true. It continues to this day to be a bald-faced lie. I didn't realize it until I was in my mid-20s. This was a lady who had no concept of what it meant to be psychologically healthy, nor to judge someone else's relative value or worth. And on a bad day, with a bad assignment, a misunderstanding, she made a statement that was far from accurate. And I took it as a part of who I was. That's where our self-worth comes from. Not just for me, but for all of us. And if you're feeling fearful, It's usually the fact that I don't feel that anybody values me. Remember our deepest fears? What's the man's deepest fear? Fear of being rejected. Failure, rejected. Not worth any respect. Unworthy of the space that you've been given. Not smart enough, not strong enough, not crafty enough, not wealthy enough, not physically able enough to be worthy of respect. So nobody appreciates or values. Ooh, that sounds like self-worth. Somebody thinking I have something of value. What's the wife's biggest fear? And being left alone, unloved, unneeded, unwanted, alone, isolated, cut off. That nobody values me. Okay, fear. It's all the same kind of a package. Even though we say it differently, we respond to it. It requires different techniques to try and push that back. Resentful, guilt. I mean, there is all kinds of ways that we can lose our self-worth. I've just put down here rule number 2. We lose our worth when people no longer value us. People value us for different reasons. If we have value as the center on a football team, and I break my leg, and I can't hike the ball any longer, I've lost some of my value. If I am the smartest kid in school, and suddenly, let's say I have a stroke or I get sick, and I can no longer function at that level, I've lost my value. If I have a relationship, let's say, and my value is based on that relationship, and then suddenly it disappears for whatever reason, or we go through a really bad time, what happens to our worth? If my partner doesn't value me, then I don't have value. Okay? And so we lose our self-worth. Sometimes it is our fault. Have you ever made a mistake? Oh, I hate making mistakes. I hate making mistakes. And why does it hurt so much? Because I feel less worthy. I should have been smart enough to see this coming. I should have seen it and avoided it. Dishonesty. Oh my goodness. I thought I could cover up my little bit of a foible, and now it has found me out, and it seems 10 times worse than when I first tried to cover it up. All right? Being dishonest makes us lose, in the eyes of those around us, our value and our worth. We do not have integrity any longer. Irresponsibility. I was just having fun. I didn't mean it anything. But all of a sudden now, I've created problems and my worth went away. Bad judgment. I don't need to go into that. I've already used that one up. Ignorance. Yeah. Corruption. Impurity. Read Proverbs. You'll find out what the foolish son finds in a different variety of ways he can lose his self-worth. Neglect. Yeah. My attention should have been focused here, but I was focused over here instead. And now I realize that I have neglected. Negative attitudes. Even when we are in a very good situation, if we are in that, oh, me way of thinking, all of a sudden our worth is and misplaced priorities. We were counting on things working out better, differently. And now I realized that I had spent my time using poor judgment. Okay. Sometimes what we lose in our self-worth is not our fault, because you have to look at it. There are things that happen, both health things, economic things, job things. There are prejudices and there are fears. There are things that come against us that we just really don't have any control about. Years ago, maybe just a quick story. I was in a northern state, and it happened that my father was a pastor in the north end of the state. My brother was a pastor in the far western edge of the state, and my church was more in the central or eastern section of the state. Do you realize what it's like to have three Douglases in the same circle? Three Douglases all in one package. There was an earthquake of fear that went through the state, and they decided the Douglases had to go. Okay? Now, one Douglas decided he'd had enough, and he retired and went to Florida. And that left us with two. That should have reduced some of the pressure, but it didn't, because they'd already made up their minds the Douglases had to go. They came after me. The Lord opened the opportunity for me to take a church that needed my help in a specific way, and I took that before they actually got their hands on me. I knew what they were doing, and their grip was closing around my neck, but the Lord opened up an opportunity for me to continue to minister. My other family members were not as fortunate. They caught the full brunt of the result. Was that our fault? Was it my fault? Was I just being a difficult person? Was it something that we did or said that shouldn't? No. It was a decision made that we're better off without these guys. Period. End of discussion. There's nothing that you could do. That's not within your control. You can't go to the Supreme Court and say, I'd like to argue my case. I am a valuable person. Throw it out. Lack of jurisdiction. I'm not going to make a judgment about that. Who do you go to? There's no place to go. You either say, I accept this as reality, or you say, no, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to go down screaming and hollering and kicking and fighting. Not going to do you any good. You might as well go ahead and just accept it. Jesus just said, this is the way God wanted it to be. And I'm going to give him the glory for it. Okay, so some things are just not our fault. So what happens? Now we have this sense of being worth less or worth lower than we were before. Okay, what do? The deepest fear of men and the deepest fear of women start to kick in, because all of a sudden we feel worthless. The fears kick in. We start getting very afraid. I cannot tell you how many dozens of times I have found ladies who are having difficulty jump from one relationship to the next, to the next, to the next, trying to find someone who will validate them and hold them in worth because they feel worthless. And only in that new relationship do they really feel valued or treasured. It almost always fails, not universally, but it has a very high percentage of failure, because every marriage eventually gets into a tension where what's the first thing that's going to happen? I married a crazy person. That's just the way we think. Was she? No, but she's going to get a lot worse as things continue Because when she feels less valued and less precious and less truly loved by whatever measure she uses of that, it's going to get crazier and crazier. Men have a much more robust way of finding their worth. They can do all kinds of self-destructive things. I mean, let's just look down through this. I can commit to working hard and long and spending endless hours because somebody's going to look at me and go, wow, you're the hardest working guy I've ever known. Is that worth? I've even had somebody say that to me once when I was having a particularly good run of things. You know, does it feel good? Well, sure it does. Okay, let's get in here and I'll put in another 2 hours each week. I got a guy that comes in every single week and tells me how many hours he worked that week. Every single week. And I didn't even ask him. Why? That's his measurement. I am the hardest working guy you know. What's his response? I'm tired, man. I've been working, man. And that's okay, buddy. You're doing a good. You're the hardest working guy I know. Okay, that's his way of gathering back some of his value. Collecting assets. My grandfather was a hoarder. In the Depression, he lost everything. He lost everything. I mean, literally lost everything. Because he'd also gotten sick, he would take pieces of his household furnishings down to the center of Indianapolis, put them at auction on consignment, and would take home enough money from his possessions that he could buy enough to live for another week, he and his 2 little daughters. Wife. He spent the entire rest of his life standing at the corner of the auctioneer's wagon, and when the auctioneer couldn't get anybody else to bid even a nickel for whatever trash he was holding up, my grandfather would sit there and say, I'll give you a quarter. I'll give you a quarter. Auctioneers loved him. He would bring home his pickup truck loaded full up to the sides with stuff that he got for a quarter or 50 cents. And you know what he always said? Buddy, if I ever need it, I got it. He got his value by having everybody in the community knew Art Wygant. Even Tagmeyer's Hardware. If they couldn't find the piece you were looking for, their phrase was always the same. Go down and talk to Art Wygant, see if he's got it. He may take a while to find it, but I bet he's got it down there. Did he own a hardware store? No. But he had everything. He just couldn't find it all the time. He got his value by collecting what he had lost in the Depression. His brother came to us after he'd passed away, and he said, I knew my brother had a problem. But there wasn't a thing I could do about it. He was getting his self-worth through that mechanism. Commit to a hobby or a career. I don't care whether you ride motorcycles as a hobby. I'm not putting anybody's hobby down. I don't value is nothing to me. I mean, four-wheeling through the woods, okay, that's fine. Fishing, that's cool. Hunting, I've seen people do hobbies. I mean, I got one guy that just loves sitting in his basement and watching the trains go round. Yeah. I got people that have hobbies that they've invested thousands upon thousands of dollars in. Because that makes them feel positive about themselves. Beauty and fitness. Oh, that's another whole lesson I could just go. And I had a teenager one time. I mean, she was a pretty, pretty gal. And her mother came to me and said, Pastor Bob, we got a problem. My daughter shoplifted fingernail polish out of the store. And she got caught. What in the world are we going to do? Fingernail polish. She had 150 different colors in her drawer. Did she need another 3 or 4 colors of fingernail polish? No. She had one earring down here that started. Before she left high school, the ring of earrings that she had piercings went all the way up and over the top of her ear. Each one made her more beautiful than the next. She thought. I won't even get into tattooing. The point is, you can go completely off the rails with this sense of fitness. Now, I grew up with Jack LaLanne on television. I mean, he lived to be in his 90s and was still out doing competitions. I'm not going to argue the fact that it probably made his life better that he was physically fit. What was it that he did in his 80s and early 90s? He'd hook himself to a rowboat and then swim across a harbor, pulling the weight of the rowboat with him. I mean, he was an incredible physical specimen because everybody looked at him and said, man, you're old as the dirt, and yet you look good, man. You look good. You're in good shape. But he died. I didn't know if you'd heard that or not. It didn't last. Sports, recreation. I promised not to say anything about the Royals, not to do anything about the Chiefs. But there are a lot of other places where you have to say people go crazy for their sports. Okay? Civic projects, volunteerism. You ever know anybody that was told, there's somebody who'll do just anything for anybody? That willingness to step in and help. There's a lot of ways we can invest ourselves to try and get our self-worth back. But I have to be honest with you. Jesus said that's like building a whole huge building on nothing but sand. Because at some point or other, the foundation is going to be realized isn't very stable, and the whole thing comes crashing down. The whole thing means our identity, our personal shape of who we are. I've had people who got so excited about, had a guy 70 years old somewhere along in there, said, my 3rd grade teacher said I would never amount to anything. Boy, if she could see me now with the farm I've got and the big grain bins that I've got filled up with the harvest that I just put away, and if she could see the way that I've got money in the bank and I've got a brand new tractor out there, and boy, she'd sure be embarrassed that she thought I'd never have any value. Really? You think your 3rd grade teacher cares that you got a grain bin full of corn? No, she may have been asking you to get serious and be ready for next weekend's test, and that's the only thing she ever was trying to do. And we realize, it was sort of all for nothing. If you ever read with a serious intention Ecclesiastes, it's a book in the Bible. Most people don't go there. The only one that's less popular is Song of Solomon, except teenage boys. They like Song of Solomon. But if you ever read Ecclesiastes, that's written by Solomon and his highest It's all for nothing. Everything is a waste. It all goes away in the end. My grandpa had a phrase. He said, when we'd complain that he was buying all this junk and all that kind of stuff, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll keep its value. After all, I'm not buying bananas. (1973) when he passed away, you know what we found? The whole place was packed full of bananas. We carried his stuff that he had spent a lifetime gathering together to the scrap dealer for just junk value. And I'll tell you another secret. Most of the stuff that he had that was of value, furniture, lumber, building materials. He was a carpenter. He liked to build things. Most of the stuff that he had collected that was of construction type materials went into a fire pit and was burned up because the beetles and the bugs and things have gotten into it or gotten wet, and it was completely worthless. The veneers on all those tables and chairs and all that stuff had gotten twisted, and we had a dog pen as big as this table or more, 5 feet high, and we threw stuff into that pit, that pin, had a wire fence around it, and it burned continuously for 6 weeks. We never lighted it. Just with the combustible stuff that we would throw in there. And every day it would relight, and it would relight, and it would relight, and it would just burn all day long, all night long, all over the weekend. And the next morning we'd come back and throw more stuff on there, and it would relight and keep going. It was all bananas. I loved my grandfather. I loved him with all my heart. That he had chosen badly where he was getting his self-worth. And then, behind rule number 3 down at the bottom, we can even commit ourselves to being bad. If you look at the diagram behind me, a hoarder is trying to be the parent to control everything. I will always have what I need. I will always be able to take care of myself. I'm going to be self-sufficient. I'm going to be a survivalist. I'm going to be the one who can control my destiny. I don't have to ask anybody for anything. I have everything I need. All right? The child, whether you're talking about hobbies or sports or collecting stuff or whatever, if you're working out of your self-worth through these 2 mechanisms, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your life. You're wasting your resources because there's no love in it. Remember, those 2 areas of your life do not have the capability of genuine love. Now, what's a better way? I'm the baddest dude that's out here. I don't know. Yeah, you can get a lot of self-worth being the chieftain of your street gang, I guess, or the one with the loudest Harley in your group of outlaw riders and all the other kinds of things that go on. It's just not worth it, because eventually there's going to be somebody comes by who's bigger and who's badder and who's more incredible, and all of a sudden your possession that you thought was so great goes away and goes to somebody else. All right, it's just the way it works. So, rule number 4, we can receive our value and worth through loving relationships and faithful stewardships of our lives. You see, God gives us our worth if we listen to him. God's estimation of our value is, I love you so much, I will let my son die a horrific death so that you can see how valuable you are. My own son, my own boy, my only boy. Do you feel treasured? Do you feel valued? We should, if we listen. But I've messed up, and I didn't do what I was supposed to, and my kids don't respect me, and they don't look up to me, and they don't understand why, and they feel like I've just wasted my life, and I go on and on and on. My neighbors all think I'm crazy. They don't understand. Well, look, first you got to start with who owns you. Who owns you? If you look at who has given themselves for your benefit, you start with what Jesus Christ did, and then you go to your most important human beings. You can say, and I've said through all my whole life, I was my mother and father's loved child. There was not a single day in my entire life that I have not felt like I was 100% loved. I made a lot of mistakes, and I did a lot of things I shouldn't have, and I'm not proud of those things. But even when that was going on, my mom would write to me. My dad would come by, and he'd put his arm around me. He'd say, "Come on, buddy. You got to put it in there. You got it in you. All you have to do is put." I was failing one of my courses as a freshman in college. And it was a hard class, and most of the class was failing, and I just wanted to go back home. My dad came to school and said, "Nope, we're going back home without you. You have to stay." You know why? There isn't one thing anybody's ever written in that textbook you can't figure out what they mean. No, you're wrong. You haven't seen this textbook. You haven't heard this professor talk. He talks down to all of us. We're all worthless in his sight. We cannot come up to his level of perfection. It happened to be botany. If you ever looked around, there's a lot of different ways that God has created different kinds of plants, biological entities, and to try and understand how they all work and how they all fit together. It was a crazy class, way too much to read, more to study. "No, Dad, you're wrong. I can't keep up with it. I'm behind all the way along." No, you are able to beat this. You have what it takes. "But I got an F." No. That's what you've got now. That's not what you're going to get at the end. When I got done, I had an A-. Because somehow or other, I figured out he was right, and the professor was wrong when he talked about how stupid we all were. I could figure it out. We are loved by somebody. And if we're not loved by anybody, we still have value and we still have worth. We have to remember that our worth doesn't come from inside, because if we're trying to make ourselves worthwhile, if we're trying to make ourselves worthy of value, we're going to end up empty-handed. I mean, you can't create value for yourself by your own creativity. But we invest in each other. In other words, if I don't have anybody else in the world that loves me, then let me put a red nose on my bubble on my nose and go down to the hospital into the children's ward and make the kids smile. They won't love me because I got a red button on my nose. But if you make them smile, it's better than sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself. I live in a retirement community in Florida, and they have all kinds of groups that meet in that retirement community. They meet at the community house, and they do wood carving, they do quilting, they do sewing, they do all kinds of card games, they do every kind of activity, sports, recreation, everything. What's it all designed to do? Every single one of those is designed to let somebody see how valuable you are. They're a part of our bridge club. They're a part of our shuffleboard team. They are a part of our horseshoe. Yes, we've come in last at every one of the competitions, but my partner is going to be standing down at the other end of that horseshoe pit waiting for me to throw my turn because we're a pair. We're ready. In retirement, you can spend your time and your energy doing a lot of stuff, but if you're not investing in somebody, you're going to end up without feeling very valuable. So we have to just simply say, if we take Jesus Christ as the pattern, we take Jesus Christ as our definition of who we're supposed to be. That goes back to our very first lesson. What's the definition of love that Jesus gave us? They will know you are my disciples if you love one another. Definition of love, I want you to love exactly like I've loved. Okay? Who did he not love? Was there anybody? Remember, he was down on his knees, washing the feet of his followers, and blessing each and every one of them as an honored guest, even Judas. And when he'd finished, he said, okay, go do what you got to do. And out the door he went to betray the Lord who had just shown him how much he was loved. Where did his value come from? It could have come from when he said, I have a Lord who values and treasures me. Instead, he went and got 30 pieces of silver as his entire worth. His entire net worth was in his hand. 30 pieces of silver. Pretty poor exchange. And as soon as he realized what he'd done, he took his entire identity, and what did he do with it? Well, first of all, he went back to the chief priest and said, I want this, take this thing back. I want no, we're not taking it back. It's blood money. Since it's in your hands, it's blood money. When we put it in your hands, it wasn't blood money. No, it was our money. But once you received it into your hands, now it's blood money. It's tainted. We can't have it back. Was he worth the 30 pieces of silver to them? No. He was untouchable to them. He was worthless, worse than worthless. He was untouchable. And he took all that money and threw it on the floor and then went out and killed himself. His identity was gone. His worth was empty, gone. There's a broadcast of Jesus Christ Superstar. It's going to be happening here as we come closer to Easter. I'm looking forward to it tremendously because there's that one song that breaks my heart. I cry every time I hear Judas start to sing. Just don't tell me that I'm damned for all time. I had it all, and I lost it all. Self-worth. In the presence of the one who loved unconditionally everybody. He'd lost the most precious possession he'd ever received. Self-worth. There's nothing you can do to any person. There's nothing you can do of any more value than to look at them directly in their eyes and let them know how precious they are. I got a couple of little girls that come in here every week, and they come running up to me every time. And they put their arms around me and hug me and want me to put my arms around them and hold them for a little bit. Why? Why do they do that? Why do the kids want to come up and give me a hug and have me put my arms around them? Because somewhere inside of them, they see someone who treasures them, who values them. Now the trick is, how do we maintain that once they grow up a little more? And I go back to Florida and I do a bunch of different things and they don't have Pastor Bob. We have to encourage enough people to come around that can keep them built up, encouraged, treasured, valued. We have single moms. Every time one of those ladies walks in here, hey, how are you doing? Man, it's so good to see you. Why? Why be that exuberant? Why work that hard? Why do I stand down here at the door and welcome the kids in the morning at the beginning of a school day? And they all come in going, and one of those kids come in this morning, he walked past me. How are you doing this morning? Welcome, come on in. Wait a minute, come back here. What do you mean? You didn't smile at me. That's the toll. You have to give me a smile or you can't get in here and get started. Then away you went. Another one came by. Wait a minute, come back here. You didn't fist bump. We got a fist bump before you go to class. Why? 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 Why would anybody? I'm not their mommy and their daddy. I'm not their grandpa. I'm not even their pastor. Why would I stand there at the door and make sure that they could get that big, heavy backpack that they've got on wheels through the door and over the threshold and into the building? Somebody values me enough to hold the door and welcome me in the morning. My friends, I want you to understand, it's not just husbands and wives. It's not boyfriends and girlfriends or anything else like that. It's every single person we touch. And if we don't invest ourselves in saying, I think you're neat. I think you're special. I think you are a necessary part of my life. We haven't loved like Jesus Christ has loved. We've fallen short of his standard. Then we have to repent of that. I was busy that day. Okay, all right, I know. We all get busy. We all get distracted. But we have to keep coming back to that center. If Jesus Christ is not the center of what we're supposed to be about, and that means giving people worth. It's called grace. They could be tax collectors. They could be prostitutes. They can be Roman soldiers, cruel and vicious as they can be, occupying forces. They can be the most despicable person you'd ever want to meet. Let's just refer to a guy named Barabbas. Or a thief that is getting exactly what he has coming. Giving someone grace, giving someone worth, can change their entire picture of who they are and what God wants to do in them. It is the fulfillment of the Great Commission. All right? Do you have any questions of me, or do you have any response or anything that there's not a lot you can say except, well, let's get on with it, I guess. Why don't we have a word of prayer, and then we'll go out there and hit the streets and do what God's given us to do. Dear Jesus, we live in a family, we live in a community, we live in a place. You've placed us here for a purpose. And if we don't have the vision of what we're supposed to do, if we don't have the purpose of how we're supposed to do it, we will most certainly mess it up. And we'll end up wasting a whole lot of time and energy spinning our wheels and getting nowhere. But Lord, if we see what we're doing as being in the model, in the pattern of Jesus, if we see what we're doing as being within the framework of who Jesus was, both in our relationships at home, our relationships at work, relationships in the community, even when we drive somebody who is just totally confused and they don't know which way to turn, and we just say, hey, can I help you with something? It's as simple as just paying attention to the person that's standing right in front of us. Lord, we are humbled at how you seem to do it so effortlessly. We are amazed at how you did it to the people that were just not pretty. Lepers and, beggars. Bodies all deformed and twisted around and ugly and nasty, smelly. For 38 years laying on a mat beside a pool. And everybody in the world looked at him as being worthless. And yet you saw him as someone who needed the touch of genuine love. Lord, we simply have to say, we're not up to this task. We're falling far short of what you called us to be. But we ask for your strength. We're going to start with the people that we share our lives with most closely. We're going to share with the people that we've invested our lives with over the longest period of time. And we're going to ask you that you show us how we need to do it better, more genuinely, more thoroughly. And then we're going to simply ask, now, expand our circle, extend our tents. The prayer of Jabez was seen by most people as being a way to become more wealthy or more prosperous. I think Jesus would have said, extend my tents to include more people that can come in underneath my wings and feel the love and the grace and the joy. Lord, we acknowledge we haven't done it right. We ask for your forgiveness, and we ask for a picture in our minds of something you'd like for us to do, and change our hearts. Give us the strength and the courage to face the new day, and we'll give you the praises as we hear your words echoing in the back of our minds. Well done. Well done. My valuable, my trusted, my faithful, my beloved friend, come and join me in my rest. Lord, there isn't any better worth that we can feel than the reward of our Lord and Savior. To say, you did it right. You did it well. Help us, Lord, to be faithful. And we'll give you the glory and the honor and the praise. Amen.